You think they stopped caring. You think the silence means it's over. But what if the coldest behavior is not the end of love at all? What if the distance, the blank stare, the slow replies, the sudden need for space are not proof that you meant nothing, but proof that you touched something too deep for them to handle? Stay with me, because this changes everything. Some people do not run from love because they feel too little. They run because they feel too much, too fast, and in a way that shakes the control they built their whole life around. To most people, real connection feels warm. To an avoidant, it can feel like pressure, like exposure, like standing in a room with no armor and no exit. So when feelings get real, they do not lean in, they freeze, they go quiet, they pull back right when things start to matter. And yes, that hurts, it feels personal, it feels cruel, but sometimes what looks heartless is actually panic wearing a calm face. Sometimes the person acting the most detached is the one fighting the hardest not to feel. And the real sign is not always in what they say, it is in what breaks. Their pattern breaks, their routine breaks, their control starts slipping. That is when the truth leaks out, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. An avoidant person usually did not wake up one day and decide love was dangerous. That fear was built slowly. Maybe closeness once brought pain. Maybe needing someone led to disappointment. Maybe opening up ended in shame, silence, or rejection. So over time, their system learned a rule: stay guarded, stay self-contained, stay in control. That rule becomes automatic. It lives in the body, not just in the mind. So when someone enters their life with real warmth, steady attention, and honest affection, it does not always feel comforting. It can feel like an emotional ambush. Their chest tightens, their thoughts race, their nervous system reads intimacy like a threat. And this is where people get confused, because from the outside, it looks like they do not care. They go still, they go cold, they say they need space, they reply late, they act distant right when things were getting closer. But inside, it is rarely empty, it is flooded. Their emotions rise, but they do not know how to hold them without feeling swallowed. So instead of speaking, they shut down. Instead of moving closer, they retreat. Watch this closely. Their coldness is often not the absence of feeling. It is feeling without the tools to manage it. It is love colliding with fear. It is the mind saying, "This matters too much," and the body answering, "Then get away before it destroys us." That is the tragedy. And if you miss that, you will misread the whole story. When an avoidant starts caring deeply, something strange happens. The safer the connection feels, the more danger their system starts to imagine. A healthy person may relax into love. An avoidant may start scanning for loss before the relationship has even had a chance to grow. They think ahead, they brace early, they imagine endings before beginnings have had room to breathe. Why? Because hope feels risky when your history taught you that closeness does not last. So they may pull away, not when they feel nothing, but when they feel too much. That is why you get mixed signals. One moment they are present, warm, almost open. The next moment they seem unreachable. You feel whiplash. You start doubting yourself. You ask, did I do something wrong? Did I come on too strong? Did they change their mind? But often the deeper truth is that your presence stirred a part of them they worked hard to bury, and now they are trying to regain control. Listen carefully, because this part matters. If you take every withdrawal as proof that you are not enough, you will carry their fear like it is your fault. It is not. Their shutdown says more about their inner battle than your value. That does not mean you excuse bad behavior. It does mean you stop making their paralysis your identity. You stop saying, "I must be the problem," and start seeing the real picture. Love is there, but it is hiding behind defense, fear, and old survival habits. A lot of people believe avoidants push others away because they want freedom, distance, or control for its own sake, but often something deeper is happening. They are not just avoiding closeness. They are trying to get ahead of pain. They expect loss. They expect disappointment. They expect the person they care about to leave, change, or pull back eventually. So instead of waiting helplessly for that feared moment, they create distance first. It gives them the illusion that they are in charge of the separation. If it falls apart, at least they can tell themselves they saw it coming. At least they were not caught needing someone who did not stay. This is why they can become critical right when things feel good. This is why they ghost after intimacy. This is why they suddenly act detached after a meaningful conversation, a tender night, or a moment of emotional closeness. It is not random, it is self-protection. And here is the painful irony. Sometimes they are silently hoping you will prove their fear wrong, not in a healthy way, not in a conscious way, but deep down there is a test happening. If I pull away, will you still care? If I act distant, will you leave like everyone else? And most people do leave eventually because the push hurts, the confusion hurts, the emotional starvation hurts. Then the avoidant says, "See, I knew it." No one stays, and the wound gets confirmed again by the very behavior that created the outcome they feared. If you really want to know whether an avoidant cares, stop watching only their words. Start watching the way they wrestle with themselves. Watch the freeze, watch the hesitation, watch how they go silent after moments that should have brought them closer. That silence can feel brutal, but sometimes it is not emptiness. It is overload. It is their system trying to survive emotions they cannot organize. They may read your message 10 times and still not answer because every possible reply feels too exposed. They may miss you deeply and still avoid reaching out because wanting contact makes them feel weak, needy, or unsafe. They may replay a conversation for days, picking apart every tone and every detail, while outwardly acting like nothing happened. This is why dealing with an avoidant can feel like standing outside a locked house while hearing movement inside. You know something is there, you just cannot get direct access to it. And that makes people chase. It makes people over-explain, over-give, over-function. But be careful here, stay with me, because this is where people lose themselves. Understanding their fear does not mean abandoning your own needs. Compassion is not self-erasure. You can see the wound without volunteering to be consumed by it. You can recognize that their distance is protection, not always rejection, while still honoring the fact that your heart needs more than silent intensity. That balance matters. Without it, you end up trying to decode every breadcrumb while starving for real connection. One of the biggest misconceptions about avoidance is that when they pull away, they are done. That is often not true. Many of them do not detach from the person. They detach from expression. They detach from vulnerability. They detach from direct engagement. Inside, they may be more activated than ever. Outside, they look completely still. And this creates one of the most painful mismatches in modern relationships. You see absence. They feel obsession. You feel discarded. They are silently tracking every shift. They notice your tone change. They remember details you forgot. They watch patterns. They read between lines that were never even spoken. Why? Because observation feels safer than openness. If they can study you, predict you, understand you from a distance, they can feel some sense of control over the emotions you awakened in them. They do not trust full surrender, so they collect information instead. They become watchers, quiet analysts, emotional detectives. They may check your stories, your last scene, your online patterns. They may ask indirect questions through mutual contacts. They may return to old messages, old photos, old moments, not because they have moved on, but because they have not. And here is the part most people miss. Avoidants do not usually obsess over people who meant nothing. If they are still tuned in, still mentally circling, still quietly present in the background, it means the bond hit somewhere real. It means you disrupted the system they usually rely on. It means your presence broke the emotional autopilot they prefer to live inside. But that silent watching is not the same as healthy love in action. It is important to say that clearly. Hovering is not healing. Watching is not leading. Presence from a distance is not the same as participation in the relationship. This is where many people get trapped. They sense the invisible connection. They notice the lurking, the random reappearance, the subtle signals, the almost contact, and they mistake it for progress. Sometimes it is not progress at all. Sometimes it is simply the avoidant trying to stay emotionally adjacent without taking the risk of showing up fully. They want to feel linked without being exposed. They want access without accountability. They want emotional relevance without emotional surrender. That is why they may disappear, then orbit. They do not always come back with honesty. They come back with traces, a view, a like, a small sign, a quiet reminder that they are still there. And if you are hungry for closure or affection, those small moves can feel huge. But do not confuse nearness with readiness. Do not confuse attention with transformation. They may still care, they may care deeply, but caring alone does not build a relationship. Caring without courage creates a loop. It keeps both people emotionally tied while nothing solid changes. So if you are dealing with this pattern, hold on to this truth. Their silence is not proof you are unlovable, but their silent obsession is not proof they are ready either. Those are two different realities, and if you blur them together, you will wait inside a story that never fully begins. Another sign people often miss is mirroring. Avoidants do not always lead with emotion. They reflect it, they echo it, they give back pieces of what you bring first. You say, "I miss you," and then they admit they miss you too. You open a tender subject, and suddenly they become just vulnerable enough to keep the moment alive. You express warmth, and they respond with warmth. But notice the pattern. It often starts with you. You move first, you risk first, you define the emotional tone, they follow it, sometimes beautifully, sometimes just enough to keep you attached. This can feel like connection, and yes, part of it is, but it is often reactive, not self-led. They mirror what feels safe because creating vulnerability on their own feels dangerous. If they wait for your cue, they can stay in control. They can test the water without jumping in. They can borrow your emotional courage without having to build their own. That is why so many people in these connections feel like they are carrying the emotional weight for two. They keep the relationship moving, they bring the honesty, they bring the reassurance, they bring the emotional language, and the avoidant reflects enough of it back to make the bond feel alive, but not always enough to make it feel secure. That is not always manipulation. Sometimes it is fear, sometimes it is the only way they know how to participate, but it still creates exhaustion, because being echoed is not the same as being fully met. And over time, emotional breadcrumbs can feel like a feast when you have been starving long enough. Here is the hard truth many people need to hear. Love that only appears when you lead is not the same as love that can stand on its own feet. If you are always the one initiating emotional depth, then you are also the one constantly proving the relationship exists. That can become a trap. You start using their responses as proof that they care, while ignoring the fact that they rarely move first. You begin filling in the gaps. You start translating small signals into big meaning because you need the connection to make sense. And maybe they do care. Maybe they care more than they can say. But care without expression, without initiative, without emotional ownership will eventually drain the person doing all the reaching. This is why stepping back matters, not as a game, not as punishment, as clarity. When you stop leading every emotional moment, you get to see what is actually there. Do they rise and meet the moment, or does the whole thing collapse without your energy carrying it? That answer tells you a lot. Because when the mirror no longer has your image to reflect, what remains is their real posture. Some people do grow, some do learn, some finally feel the cost of hiding and start doing the deeper work. Others retreat further into silence. Either way, the truth becomes visible, and truth, even when painful, is cleaner than confusion. Do not be afraid of seeing clearly. Confusion keeps you tied up, clarity sets you free.